In this video help, we're going to be covering the labor work order invoice and the material work order portal. Now I'm going to show you the header. This is the header for the work order invoice. You need to create the record in here by doing the drop down, picking the project, and then in this particular case the work order will automatically be assigned so you don't have to add the data. The work order date would be the date of the work order that's supposed to start. The information for the company that you're working for, as far as for this particular project, would be dropped down and pick that particular company. Then it would fill in all the information in this area for that data, if you have it filled in the customer data form above here. You'll see it up here. This is the company, the HRD Systems Inc., and that's the company data that you would pick from the particular project and project ID that you're working in. Now, what's going to happen is the material work order portal, which is this item here, will actually be edited here only. You'll actually go to either the portal or on the other record over here. If you click on the work order invoice, we're going to show you that. And by the way, this is a scrolling record, so as many as you put in here, that would be different work orders that you would be creating. But anyhow, coming back up and hitting the portal button will take you to that particular work order for this particular project with the stuff that you entered in the header. The header is this field right up here. This is the labor portal where you're going to be adding the labor and the materials. Now, let's discuss why you have a work order invoice in a project where you might have no invoices that you're entering to a client, but yet a contract. There's a couple of different things that we had to do for the approach for this application, in that there are a number of different kinds of businesses and they have different requirements. For example, you may do a contract that also includes services, and that would be under the work order invoices where you're doing services, either labor and materials that you're using. But there's an additional one. For example, if you're doing a proof of concept and you're actually designing a product where you're going to build it from scratch, and that's your job that you're going to do as far as your company for your client, then you would need to have information like the labor that's going to be consumed in order to do this, and the materials that you're doing as you put them in. Now, under a proof of concept, you'll see where we have the production build down here on this work order, or on this one, which is a sample also, it says pending services. So you have both options. You can do labor and services, and you can do materials, or you can do the build itself as far as your concept build and put all the labor required to build the concept design, so you can get an idea of the actual production costs and labor and materials. Now, in order to cover a lot of different kinds of businesses being a universal application, what I've done is I've added a few things that are not very consistent with every business. In the labor, in this particular case, this little guy up here, you're doing one set of labor based on the scheduled service, what kind of service you're going to be doing. And as always, you can always edit this to fit your particular requirements. Remember that all the blue items here are drop downs. So if I put it in here, this would be your employee listing with their job position. And obviously you have engineers and draftsmen and whatever you're going to be using in your business. You could have admin people in here if they're putting cost against the actual design or actual services. And you can also put in their services. As I mentioned before, when you're creating one of these, if it comes out of the invoice, where the actual invoice item is being used to show the particularly like materials down here, you would go ahead and that would come out of the invoice area. For example, if I click down, you could see all the part numbered items that are in your inventory and then the description of the items. Now, there's some reasons why we're splitting these out, where you have to actually look for the actual item with its part number on the back. Now, it's only going to put the description here and only the part number here in the materials. Then there's another drop down similar to the one work type up here, which is the pending type description, which is what is the materials. Is it a scheduled thing you're doing, a lubrication or whatever? And again, you can always pop this up and edit those to fit your individual requirements for the universal app. Okay, now up here in the labor, we've already picked the type of person we're going to use, and then we use their hourly rate. and this would be their hourly rate in here, and it would be listed over here. And then what you would do is you'd take, say for example, I did an engineer 1 at $99, and you can see it showing up here. I put in the $99 from that list so that I could calculate this, and I put in 99 times 2 and then 198. Then I went over here and I added the task description. The task description for this particular thing might be, change oil or repair fuel pump or whatever it might be as far as the labor is concerned. If you're doing a production step, then it would be a process, and that process would include the labor to do that process. And this is a situation where you don't pre-quote the services and time. What you do is whatever the time is that it takes in order to do that particular step, either if it's a service scheduled or unscheduled or a production, this is all information that can be used by the project managers in order to understand how the project goes as far as labor, to accumulate the labor time and money that it would take in order to provide that service on this task. So you're going to be adding all the service tasks. Now this scrolls here, so you can scroll down to put as many of these in here as you have to. Being an important part of this is the input screen. What does that mean? The input screen is where you add data, and then you use these buttons over here to do whatever the task is you want to do as far as ancillary work that you're doing. This is all the labor, all the materials. But if I wanted to go look at, for example, the work order list view, I could go over here to the list view and have a record where I can run or look for data by a particular record. In this particular case, here's the work order number 4 and number 6. Now, I did play around and I was testing by deleting some of the records. So these would normally run sequential, like 1 through 4 and then so forth all the way through as far as the work order is concerned. But in testing, I was doing some things. And when I'm saying that too, when you purchase this application, if you want all this information removed so that you start cold, you can. Or you can ask me to go ahead and just leave them in there, and then you can edit on the fly. But I will take some of these, like I'll reset them back to work order 1 and so forth, so that you won't get confused as far as how the sequential system is supposed to work. Now things like the work order numbered are sequenced automatically by the computer. As you add stuff to the database, it will automatically add the next work order as you're going through. And the work order can be between different projects too. For example, you got a work order 1, work order 1 for project number P1000 or whatever it is. And then you got another work order 6, different date, but for another, this is like project 2. Let's go back over here again. You'll see that it carries that project work order number over here as far as the work order, but it doesn't show the project because the project itself is up here at the top of the screen. And you'll notice when you're moving through these records, you can come over here, and if you're in project 1, you can easily click on this and go to project 2, and the sequential records would all be down through this area here, and you can pick them as you go down. And let's move this down slightly. Okay, as you're going down through these, you could be able to move to whatever record you want by tapping or clicking on the record ID information over here. Now, in project 1, you can have as many work orders as you need. Obviously, that's not an issue. But when it comes to, let's go back over here, as you're moving down through, all the materials will be listed here. And one of the principal things that happens in this record, if you scroll down and you create a bunch of records in here for this particular work order number, you can go over here and you can go in and see the material list view, which is for the materials itself down here, and click this and you'll see all the materials that are being used under that work order. Now, I want to point out that this is work order for project number 1, and the work order number is actually here, but you'll notice down here that this is a different project, and it's project 2. So you can see that you can put any number of them in here, and then you can use your do action button to do a search for the project. And what the project will do is it'll summarize. In this particular case, it's going to bring out all the records for the particular materials that were used for this project number 1. If you want to see all the other project data, you can run one of the reports, and it'll run the project report showing you all the materials and everything that were used as far as the material report. And you will do the do action and start a search and then perform the search based on the information that you're looking for. In this case, if it were a production assembly, I could look for all the production assemblies for every project, or 1 by putting the project ID number and that in there. Now, when you go ahead and do the search, you should do it in the actual work order where you're at. For example, I'd go over to the work order and I'd pick whatever I want as far as going into the portal. Now I go into the portal by clicking. If I want labor, I click here. If I want materials, I click here. It'll take me into the individual record, and then I can do a search within that individual record. So let's do that. Get an idea of this is the portal record, and what I want to do is I want to search for, this is a single record, but I want to search for maybe all the production or pending services or whatever as far as this particular one is concerned. Maybe I want to drop one of these down and look for a certain kind of thing, like all the things that are awaiting parts, all the ones that are in service. So you have a lot of variables you can use. Or I can use the description in the material, or the service type description that I'm using, or a part number. Maybe I want to see every record that ever used this part for any of the projects. Or I can pick a project and then put that in there and go ahead and generate a record that I'm looking for. Okay, so let's go back and we'll look at the work order material input in here, and then I'm going to go back to the first record to see the record we were working in. And you can see there's 2 records in here and an empty one down here. To start another record, just click in and pick anything that you want on any of these rows. It'll start another new record. Another one will drop down to the bottom. Okay, so over here is the summary for the labor in hours, and that'd be the count of hours, the labor cost, the materials cost, the work of this and this together is the sum of the work order so far. The amount paid so far would be in here of 1, and then the balance that's due as far as the amount balance to be paid. And you know this is $41.50. I put $1 in, and $40.50 shows you that it's calculating for you. Now, when you're doing the hours and everything over here, you don't have to touch any of this. This is all calculated based on what you're putting in the portal and or in the materials for the materials listing. So as you accumulate more items in the scrolling areas here in the portal, it will keep changing this information over here as you add time, and the cost for the time as far as the calculated ID over here was 198, and then the summary would be the information. Now I'm going to throw you a curve, and the reason I'm doing this is I want to show you that the flexibility of a universal app has in this particular portal area over here. You can have this part ID, and you can put in the amount that you're actually using, and then you've got 2 fields here that might be questionable what they're for, and I'm going to explain this. If you're doing service is a thing where you're going to charge the full price. So the price for that would be, for example, price of this item is $22.50 based on the actual inventory standard price. Now what happens if you're doing a production assembly and you're not going to be selling this product, but you want to know what the actual material cost is at the cost? Well, look at over here. I've got no cost because it's a service, and I'm using price because I'm selling the item as far as the cost of the material. Down here, though, I don't have any price. What I did is I put the cost in based on the drop down here. For example, I know that this particular item cost, in this case, the first 2 items here is the cost, and $21 is what I'm doing. The part ID is R109A, and you'll see down here I got R109A. That tells you that is the part that I used over here. Now, unfortunately, it's difficult because of the way that some applications are designed, that you cannot do certain things because the database doesn't allow you to. And that's, in this particular situation, having to look up a part number may be kind of difficult. As far as trying to find the one you're looking for, because you're looking at price first and then you're looking for the part number. So what you'd have to do is probably look up the item, and the way you can do that is to go into the edit portal and then go ahead and see what the things cost as far as standard price is concerned. That would be included in the inventory screen, and that's where this information is coming from the inventory area. So in this case it's $15 for this particular part, and the 109A is $21. That is at cost, and cost because this is a production item and we're only looking for the production cost at the cost level. And there's other reasons why you would want to do this. Like we said before, this could be a proof of concept, but maybe what you're doing too is you're looking at particular cost as you want to on the fly. And over here at price, you're going to see, now let's look at this. We're looking at the 12345-01 and the 123450. This is the price. The difference was $21 as opposed to $22.50. So there's like a 20% markup on this to create that particular record in the inventory area. Now, if you're looking at something and you only want to, say for example, you're doing a project and you want to see what the cost would be if you remove something. I did a database where this guy was doing builds where he puts windows in yachts. And there were different kinds of windows that he could put in the yacht, but he picked a different price based on which window he was putting in. He could also have a situation where he has the actual part number for that individual window, and maybe he's going to not put one style in, but he's going to put another one in. And maybe that would be in a different project that was similar to the one we're doing here. It's very simple to take and either change it to that to see what the build cost would be at price or at cost when you're doing a proposal, so you'll know exactly what you're doing as far as what the cost might be. And you can change them independently row by row. And the same thing occurs in the drawing package. If you change it here, you can change it in the drawing package and supplement maybe a different item. And then all you would have to do is take and indicate that. In this case, if you're doing a 1 here, that tells you you're going to have one of these at that other price, depending on what you're looking at. And let's say, for example, this is a 12345-01 in this project, and maybe it's an 02 in the other project, where one has a nickel frame and another one has a brass frame. And you could change it in your build concept and everything here, and then change it in your drawing package to have the drawing package calculate different parts that you may need on the build. And that's why you're pulling these two items together for the labor and the materials to identify the difference between cost and priced. Now, obviously when you do stuff like this, and I have to create it in here, you may only want to ever do everything by price. Well, that's not a problem. But you don't put two items in the same row. For example, you do not put price and cost in the same row, because it'll mess up. Watch, for example, if I came down here and put the $21 in here, it's now $43, and you have a build and a cost price. That's not acceptable. It'll actually throw your price off. You'll see up here it's $64.50 now, and it throws everything off. So when you're going through and you're adding the items in here, if they're going to be for like a service, it wouldn't be at cost, it'd be at price. So we're going to go ahead and delete that, and now it's going to set it back to the $22.50. So those are the kind of things you have to be looking for. And the next thing I'm going to show you is, say for example, this is a replaceable, and maybe it's a core, and you have to send it back to somebody to get it serviced, and you get credit for that. You're going to want to follow your serial numbers. For example, if I replace something, I want to put the serial number in on the one that I replaced, that I put back in the unit. So that tells me that this one has this particular serial number that was put in when I serviced it. Same thing goes down here. If you are building something, you really want to put the serial number in the one you added in your build. So in this particular case, the hose is not something probably that has a serial number on it. It's a generator belt, pardon me. So that would probably not have any ID on it. So you wouldn't be putting that serial number in here. So as you go through, and I'm going to recap, you're going to have one item. Now you require the part quantity in order to calculate this. If you don't put a quantity in there, it's not going to calculate the value in that row. So if you see something that looks a little bit odd, make sure that you have the quantity in there and the correct pricing or cost that you're putting in. Okay, let's close this little video as far as the next things that we have to do. We've already looked at the order list view and the material list view. Let's say, for example, I want to print just the labor, which we're going to do. We have a page 1 and a page 2. Page 1 is the labor. Page 2 is the materials cost. Let's say that I have more on a regular item than I can print, and I need a long form. I'm going to go to show you that. If I go over here and I put the labor click in here, and this is an actual printable invoice if you have to print it. And what happens, it has all the summarization for the entire project as far as labor and materials on here. And this is the labor itemized below in the portal. The same thing goes if I go to number 2 and I click on 2. I'm going to have the same things, but only this time it's going to be the materials on page 2. You can see these are the materials, and it summarizes the materials up here at $43.50. And yet it's part of a two-page invoicing system. So you have one for materials and another one for labor. You could have a number of them, and I could say in this particular case, I think there's 10 or 11 here on the row. If what happens is that you have to have a long invoice where you had maybe 30 items in here, you would go over and print from the work order print long. When you go into the print order long, what happens, it breaks the record out with a summary at the top, and then it shows you each individual item that was in here as far as the items for the material. Now what we're going to do, and you can see up here it says materials, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do a search and pick the work order number that we want to pick it from. You can use this over here and the date if you want to put a date in specific to what date these were worked, or you leave the date undone and just do the work order number 4 to show all the records. And here are the 2 records that we had in that particular work order invoice, and down here we only had 1 when we were doing it, and this is a different project. So you can see this has its own different work order, different date, and everything over here. If you had to delete a record for one reason, typically what happens is sometimes people will get a quote or something like that under a service thing, and they'll create the item as a quote, and then if they don't use it, they'll just go back and delete the quoted one item that they're not going to be putting in under service. So you could do that. When you delete the record, it'll delete it out of the input area that on the other screen that we were on, so that would be removed over here also. It's best to remove in a portal record like this, remove the record rather than over there on the input record. So you just pop over to this particular area that you want for the long invoice, and then go ahead and take it out, or you can do it on the materials page also. Okay, so if you need to do a do action, instead of having everything up here at the header, I put it in each record so you can still have access to the do action and the map within this area. Because if I put it at the very top on this long record that we're doing here, they wouldn't show in all the different records. Okay, so you can go down here and you can still have the access to it as far as that's concerned. Every time you see a bar like this, it's for only this record, and then this down here would be only for these records. So it's edited on the individual row items, not on the header. So if you're taking one out, you can see there's 2 records for items there and 1 down here. You can tell that by the repeat of the information in this particular record. The run report is if you're in here and you do a find and it eliminates the header, click on the run report and it'll bring back the header for all the records in the application. So to say, for example, if I did a do action search and I came back and I had the records that I wanted in the current selection, but I didn't have the header, just click the run report and it'll bring back the header in that row. Print date is the print date that you actually print the invoices. It won't be anything, for example, it won't be a date you started the service because that's over here. And you can see that this is the 20th, this is the 27th. If you needed something that had additional information or you wanted to change this particular screen, you always have the access to us to go ahead and modify it to fit your particular needs. Okay, let's go back over to the work order, and you can see over here they have the work order information over your long invoice for labor and long invoice portal and everything down here for the work order list view. If I wanted to go to the list view for the materials, I could have each individual one here. Now you may want to also use the list views to show certain items and certain monies and stuff like that were put in here and the current status of each one of these records. Maybe I want to go into project 1 and do a search for project 1. So I start the search, I go over here and I put in project 1, and then I go ahead and run it, say perform the search, and you can see now I'm only looking at the records from here for that particular record. Now I want you to understand that we're not leaving you with no sub data here. If you want to go to the particular report that you're looking at, for example materials report, when we get there on the next videos. Okay, let's go back in. We're back into this area where we had everything before. What you can see is you have both the long invoices, the individual pages, and the list views in this particular record. Of course, if you want to navigate to another portion of the database, you would go ahead and click this and you'd have access to all the screens in the application. What we're going to be doing is I'm going to show you that we're going to be going in and looking at different reports to identify how they work and how you can do different things with these particular reports. That'll be in the next video that we're going to be working through. As always, if you have issues or questions, go ahead and contact us at our support at ontargetsolutions.biz.